Tēnā koutou katoa, everyone. This is the Nullified Take Here channel here on YouTube, where we've got the TNT takes for you, or the Mucky take. Mucky is taking over, baby. Like, let's just plant this flag and let's die on this hill with it. It's a Mucky takeover, and I'm joined by three very beautiful, very amazing guests. And I'll start off, as always, with the lovely lady on my right. She is the great, she is the wonderful, she is the vicious V. V, how are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm all right. I'm a little bit sad over the treatment of the Traitors this week. I think they just weren't given a chance this week. So I'm a bit sad.
Yeah, it has been a pretty devastating week. But, I feel like a lot of my heart has been broken, V, because time and time again, I feel like you always choose to side with everyone else but me when it comes to smartest move of the week. So my heart's just shattered at this point. I don't feel anything. But, when it comes to, I was going to say feeling things, but I feel like this sounds a bit wrong. But let's talk about, let's talk about my other co-host here this evening. She is a stunner tonight, as you can tell. Is the great, the wonderful, the amazing Julia. Julia, how are you?
Good evening. Great. My word. Hey, did I not call Bailey being the freaking one to watch? I think on episode 1 and 2, I went, why? I feel she was giving me the vibes that she was going to be our snake in the grass. And I reckon I'm going to call it right now that Bailey would be playing one of the best Traitor games in the world at the moment, I reckon. Currently, I reckon.
I agree. I feel like it's very close to Brooke's game, actually, from your season, where Brooke, I feel like, was just, snooping everyone. But there's one person who he did not snoop, and that is one of season 1's greatest strategists. He led the banishment against one of New Zealand's most iconic faithfuls, in Mike Perdue. He is a great strategist and a fantastic person. It is the great and the wonderful and the most faithful Dylan. Dylan, how are you, man?
Thanks. I'm not taking credit for leading that. I don't know what it looked like, but I did not lead anything against Mike. I've apologized to him many times. I'll do it again now. Sorry, Mike. Good week of traitorsing.
Absolutely. What's it been like for you watching this season play out? Obviously you played in season 1, and now you're watching a new brand of cast play the game that you did last year. Like, how does it all feel?
It's fun watching some people do it better than we did. I think, from week 1, you could tell that they were moving faster, harder, and better than we were.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like you guys just set the standard, really. Like, what was it, 6 traders that got taken out? Like, the most number of traders in any, trader season history. You had Sam, who made history as well by voting correctly every single time. You guys set such a high record for season 2 to beat, and I feel like they're slowly catching up. Was it at now, V? 5 traders now?
Yeah, they've done well, but in a different way. I think they're getting to a similar end result. They've got kind of the same level of trader success, but in a it just feels like a different, they're not following in our footsteps. They're not doing the same things we did. They're just getting to the same end place.
Yeah.
Just a different way of doing it. It's great.
Yeah. Well, someone who I do just want to give a cheeky shout out to is Andre. Thank you so much once again, brother, for sending in $10. You are an absolute legend, just like everyone else here on the podcast. Thank you so much for your amazing support. But Julia, let's dive right into it. 7 people left at the end of this week. And something that I find really fascinating is that I feel like you've got one big group and then 3 different like individuals. So in this one group, you've got Ciali, who's obviously the core center of it, and he's got Joe and Jason around him, and Bailey's attached to that just because both her and Ciali are traders. And then you've got Kat, Noel, and Donna sort of on the outskirts. Is there any way you can see for Kat, Donna, or Noel to sort of break that awesome foursome?
Gosh, I don't know, man. I feel it could go any way at the moment, because this is why the editing has been incredible. But in terms of the storytelling of what's going to happen next, in terms of alliances, I guess. Gosh, I was, when I watched the last episode, I went, I mean, this is potentially going to happen. But I mean, and then I saw the preview of episode, what are we up to, 11 next week?
Yeah.
And then I went, maybe that's not going to happen, because it looked like Bailey finally was starting to receive some heat. So maybe Ciali is just going to come in hot and throw under the bus for the first time and play the you've never been talked about card, which is true. She has never been talked about. And, I'm worried for her. I'm worried for her that he's going to be like, the heat's been on me and Ben's gone and you haven't been talked about. I reckon it's you. And then he'll be the sole trader left. That's what I'm thinking will happen, maybe. I don't know. And in terms of alliances, maybe that's his go at getting rid of Kat, maybe.
Yeah. Well, we've covered many shows together, and I feel like Traitors is not really a show about alliances. I feel like people sort of have their groups who they trust, but they're willing to flip on each other all the time.
Yes.
But I do think, though, Sally's got a good core group, and I don't see either Jason or Joe even voting Sally out, even if they think he's a traitor. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think Joe has started to be a little bit of a wild card over the last couple of episodes. I'm not really sure where he's coming from. And I'm not even sure if he's 100% invested in the whole thing or if it's all just fallen on top of him. But I think for the first time, you can actually see an alliance forming with those guys. And so, but I can't see Ciali being faithful, committed to them as a trader. So it's kind of an interesting, why would you try and make a lie? I don't know. It's all very confusing me. It's all very confusing to me, the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's not a game that really tends itself towards alliances. There's no way to win as a group, really. So at some point, it's going to have to come apart. And if you're... This is always why I think a lot of people suggest this strategy of playing the game where if you're a faithful, you find a traitor at the beginning that you're convinced is a traitor and you stick close to them. And that's, arguably what Andrew thought he was doing with Jackie and what Ben was maybe trying to do with Jane. And that's all well and good. But as soon as that traitor knows that you as a faithful know that they're a traitor, they're going to have to get rid of you at some point because they can't be in the end game with you.
No.
And similar sort of thing, if you're a traitor and there's other traitors, you kind of want to get rid of them, as you start to come into those final days. Like, it's not a game of alliances particularly.
Yeah.
And then in the early parts of the game, when you've got lots of people, if there are a bunch of people who are behaving in a way that doesn't make sense, who are making votes that they can't explain, then they're going to become targets. It's just a game that doesn't really suit itself to alliances, which is why the Pacific Ring of Fire is interesting, right? Because they were quite explicit that it was us to the end 5 and then we figure it out from there. But it's kind of like, how do you figure it out?
Yeah.
What does that look like? It's a bit like, in season 1, it's a bit like, how do you get the wine barrels to the finish line and then decide who crosses. You know, it was like all well and good in theory, but how was it ever going to work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you're in Ciali's position, I feel like he's got the most direct path to the end at this point. Is there a case for him to flip on Jason and Joe, or do you reckon he should just ride that all the way out to the very end?
Seems like his plan makes sense to write it out. To flip, if he's seen to flip, then that throws everything. So he can only flip on one person at a time, really. And I suppose he can murder someone and then try and flip on them to banish them. But any sign of that is suspicious behaviour that catches votes.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what's heartbreaking to watch? Was Ben. I really think that he went in there committed to being a traitor, and was going to have this cool 3 situation of like, yeah, we can take it to the end, and not realizing, until that last moment at Roundtable that, again, he was the patsy, I guess, to be thrown to the wolves. But you could see genuinely in his heart that he was, I'm sorry, Ciali, I've got to vote for you, to try and cut for everyone. I've got to keep the whole thing, the ruse going, So I think
he had a good opportunity.
Yeah.
He had a good opportunity in that he had the shield, right? Like if he'd stood up at breakfast and gone, I got the shield, they must have tried to murder me last night. Like that's a solid deflection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he didn't for whatever reason.
Yeah, and why do you think Kat didn't share the information about the shield either? Because I feel like both of them have got a clear, faithful, sort of, I guess, look at that point, because everyone thinks that there was another murder, not a recruitment. So why do you think Kat didn't share that who had been at the shield?
I don't know why she didn't, and I don't know why Ben felt he couldn't.
Yeah, that wasn't clear to me either.
Yeah. Yeah, if only we had Mark, right? He would have been asking these questions, pushing everyone's buttons, having everyone call him arrogant pricks.
Yeah. But Mark was convinced that he could find a traitor by looking for someone who had never voted for a traitor, which just seems very unaware of the way the game works. So I'm not sure he would have picked up on it.
Yeah, well, let's take it to the start of the episode. And Julia, once again, I feel like this season is so great at giving us, like, last-minute jaw-dropping moments, right? We had Bree all of a sudden turning on Andrew, right? We had Mark coming up with this plan, and he blackmailed Jane and then decided to leave, right? Because that would cause the most chaos. And I feel like it happened again, where we saw at breakfast, Ciali is really sad, but then he admits he's the one that murdered Utah.
That was so good.
So good. So good.
Such a great little segue edit. Oh my gosh. I loved that so much. But did you guys notice the look that Bailey gave him? I don't know if anyone else picked up on that, but I went, oh gosh, I hope that no one else saw that, because it was kind of, she was looking at his reaction to see, I don't know, it was probably the way that it was shot, but man, that was such a wonderful moment where I went, oh my God, he's so here to play this game.
You and I have both played the game, Julia. Do you think during the game you ever really noticed who was looking at who? Like I went in thinking, oh, I'll watch who's watching who at different points, and I don't think there was ever a point where I was able to actually pay attention to that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think now, because it's fun to watch as a viewer, because we know who they are. And so we're going, oh my gosh, did someone see that? Then they'll know that it's those two. But while you're in it, you're absolutely right. Nobody's, you don't
well, I
have,
guess Joe saw who was it? Britt and Molly look at each other. So there were sometimes we see it.
Yeah. Or the drinking, the gulps. That was my favorite.
The gulps. That was solid gulps. Yeah.
Well, actually, something that
now I see.
That's pretty suspicious there, Julia.
Yeah.
Well, something
Don't
that Sam
say
brought
solid gulps.
Well, something that Sam brought up on the podcast last week, which I thought was so funny, is that I think Sam is the reason why Terry gets banished and why Jane even gets banished. Because apparently he said, as a joke, if you drink water, you're a traitor. because he was there during the trader selection. And so, poor Terry and poor Jane all got taken down because of Sam.
He should know better. The crew don't talk. Shut up, crew.
Yeah.
Well, Dylan, what's your thoughts on Utah this season? I feel like he played such a strong game this season, and it was sad to see him go. What's your overall thoughts on Utah as a player?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think because what's been fascinating as the season sort of makes its way out is different players have had different moments to shine. And Utah was sort of relatively quiet background in the first kind of half of the season, and then sort of came out strong, and suffered the consequence of being a strong trader. It's being a strong faithful rather. It's a story as old as time itself. He was playing a really strong game by the end and making some good connections. I think it's interesting though because it's like, even as a viewer, we watch that. In the game, you see it, and there's a lot of confirmation bias, right? You see someone making good calls, and you're like, oh shit, they know what's going on. And as a viewer, we see the same thing. We're like, oh, that person's got it right. They know what's going on. But I think oftentimes it's just, it's luck more than anything, because you can see how many people are confidently wrong as well. And so it's just good luck.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Julia, do you think it was the right decision for Ciali to turn on Utah at this
100%.
point?
Yeah, smart move. Yeah, he had to go. Yeah, you got to get rid of them because it's too much influence. That's part of the game, right? And we say it's not a social game, but it kind of is, because it's maybe not in terms of alliances and stuff, because at the end of the day, you're gonna, it's hard to retain an alliance to a degree, but too much influence. So if somebody was saying, hey, I think it's this, and if their name comes up and people are going to lead on that, then you kind of need to dispatch those people that are comfortably going to lead a takeout, so it's a smart move. It's so hard, like long-term strategy. You just have to hold for as long as you possibly can, without showing your cards too early,
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think Bailey is doing so beautifully. I have not really seen her. I mean, she kind of has changed, from her, maybe episode 2, 3, we started seeing more of her and being more vocal at roundtables and stuff. But she has maintained the most pristine reputation. Reputation's not the right word. So has anybody even mentioned her at all? She's so under the radar, man.
It was Mike, but at that point, he was trying to take out Whitney, not Bailey, but he kind of just threw Bailey out as kind of like a side man.
Yeah, okay.
Almost.
I mean, and so good and so composed and so gentle as well and unassuming. But she's got the balance right. She's got unassuming, but then enough. She's just so smack bam in the middle, which is such a hard balance to retain long term. And now it's going to come down to the test, these last 2 episodes, as if she can hang on.
Well, there's a player who we haven't chatted about yet who's really come out on her own in these last couple of weeks, and that is Kat. And I feel like Kat is Bailey's saving grace at the moment, because she's drawing so much attention, not only to herself, but to Ciali as well. V, what's been your thoughts on Kat in these last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think she's been outspoken the entire time, and the fact she hasn't been banished or murdered yet really actually surprises me. And I do think she could be one of the next to go, because she's got her ear to the ground. She's always willing to throw a name out there. She's not shy about how she feels about anyone. So, it was an interesting couple of episodes for Kat.
Yeah, she really did take the charge of going after Ciali. Like, I feel like there was such a great read she had, but some of the evidence she had was when he was a faithful, not really as a trader. And so, it's such a crazy game, right? Like, anything can just make you a target. But we do get to the round table, Julia, and I was heartbroken. I really was, seeing poor Molly get banished. Like, what was your thoughts on Molly?
It was down to the wire, eh? It was one vote, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it was real. I felt really gutted for her because she's played a really great game. Really, she was pretty much actually probably quite similar to Bailey, I guess. You know, in terms of a faithful game, she played a similar game where she had a really nice medium. Just unlucky that she just didn't have enough there, and I think it was Noel that got sent her home. You know, just the response that she had in the round table saying, "Oh well, you got to be." She said looking at other people, or what was that? I can't remember what it was. That kind of put the nail.
It's like you've got to be looking at other people who's not speaking up. But I feel like she didn't really give a good enough argument on why it wasn't her that really put the nail in her coffin.
It's very hard, I think. I don't know how you successfully say that you're not a traitor. Like, it depends on what people come at you with. If they come at you with a specific piece of evidence that you can refute, then so be it. But if it's just vibes, I don't know how you ever turn people on that unless you can throw someone bigger and onto the fire. Like, it's sometimes I think it's just your time. It's just the vibes, hit you, and there's not much you can do about it. It's just the table has turned against you, I suppose. And it's rough because I think you see people see it coming, and it's kind of like, shit.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, Dylan, we do see a lot of the times throughout the season, Molly, while she wasn't leading the strategy, she was always the first person everyone would talk to about these things. Like, we saw it with Mike, we saw it with Ben, we saw it with Noel a few times, like early on. A lot of people always, or even with Britt as well, like everyone just kept coming up to Molly for strategy, but didn't really seem like she was throwing out names. How important is throwing out names in the game of Traitors?
It's weird, because some people can get away with not doing it. Like, some people will get away. I don't think Sam in his season really brought names to the table ever, or even into groups beforehand. And other people, if they're not throwing out names, become suspects for it. I don't know what makes the difference, whether it's a personality thing or just like the kind of tone you set for yourself at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
I think being engaged is important, and being engaged on the level that people expect from you. So in my game, I was generally able to get away with having quite, specific conversations about people and running ideas. And I think if I had stopped doing that, or if I had changed the way I was engaging in the game, that would have made me suspect. It's the same, I think, for anyone. They kind of, maybe those first 2 days, you kind of get a feel for how people are engaging in the game, and when they change, there's the
consistency,
demeanor shift.
Yeah.
Or like, it doesn't have to be consistent, like the same thing all the time, but it has to be consistent with who you've established yourself to be and how you've established yourself to play the game.
Yes.
And I think that's hard for some people. Like, I know Joe, and especially in episode 9 where he voted for himself, like, he was obviously having a hard time that day. And I think, he's kind of up and down all over the place a little bit throughout the series. And I think another player who'd had that kind of crash that day might have found themselves, getting banished. But for someone like Joe, people can see that behavior from him and be like, oh, okay, he's having an off day today.
No, it's real. It's authentic.
Yeah,
and it's consistent with him. It's consistent with who he's been.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I found that completely with you, Dylan, as well. You were never on my radar, ever. I went, oh no, that's just Dylan. It was the same.
Yeah.
And so, but like you say, it was the personality, just who you were. This is, and so you could see the consistency, that there was no change. It was methodical thinking. I was also slightly terrified of you because I was going, he's on to all of us.
Yeah, I wasn't onto anyone about anything. I don't think I ever really knew what was going on.
But I think though you had a lot of sway though too, Dylan. So I think because people kind of saw you as this mastermind because you were always watching, or you always appeared to be watching. So I think people knew that, oh gosh, if you got under Dylan's radar, or and you mentioned him, wow, look at Mike Kudu.
Yeah.
then you would be worried. I was thinking, oh gosh, if Dylan brings up my name, then I think that I'm a goner because I think he's got enough influence.
It was interesting. I had that sort of conversation after the game with Colin as well, who was always like, "Oh," and I was like, "I didn't realize that I had that perception was happening." So that's interesting, just your own perception as well. So yeah, it's an onion, layers.
Yeah. Well, something that is so interesting about the game of Traitors, right, is that it is pretty much a 24/7 game, right? The game never really stops. Whereas other reality shows, you do have like your moments to pause, your moments to stop, and stuff like that. How hard is it actually to stay composed throughout the whole game? Because we see Joe throughout this episode, he's just a hot mess after Utah leaves. Like he wants to quit if Ciali or Jason gets voted out. Like he's done. He's out. Like how did you guys like keep composed in your own seasons?
I think
I never stopped thinking about it.
Yeah, you compartmentalize it, eh?
Well, the weird thing for me was like by about day 3, I was dreaming about the game. By the time I left the game, I literally, because when you leave, on a game like this, on a show like this, there's like a psychologist employed by the production, and when you leave the game, you have an exit interview with the psychologist just to make sure they haven't broken your brain, essentially. And in my exit interview with the psychologist, she's like, do you have any sort of concerns? And I was like, I'm worried that I won't be able to stop thinking about this until I see it on TV. And I was like genuinely worried on my way out because I at that point had been dreaming about it, thinking about it constantly when I was in my room. I had took books to try and read. I never read a book. I'd start to read a book and then my mind would drift off, going, "What was that thing that Mike said?" Or what's Matt up to? And so it's difficult to not have a way to turn off. And I think, depending on your personality and where you're at mentally, like that can be difficult because it is 24/7. Like a bunch of those hours you're being sat in a corner and told not to talk, but otherwise you're in the game.
Yeah. Well, we do get a great mission, Julia, and something that I've loved so far about the season is that I feel like the missions are just so overboard. They're just so over the top. Like normally with other Traitors franchises, it's like, oh yeah, it's a mission, and you tend to like not really pay much attention to it. But I feel like all the missions this season, are some of the best parts of the episode sometimes. Like they're just so captivating, so enjoying to watch. And essentially, they're all driving out in these cars, and then they get kidnapped. A bunch of people with a mask, that they put sacks over their heads, they drag them out of the cars. I loved like Jason's response where he just locks the door, like nah, like I'm not going down. And so they get taken away into like a barn with it all locked up, and they have to find a magnet to attach to a key, but the key doesn't necessarily unlock their cuffs, and unlocks someone else's cuffs, and then you quite literally have to stab someone in the back, robbing them of chance of a shield. Like, what was your thoughts on this mission?
What I love about this season is that the missions have been so savage and a way to undo people emotionally, to really stir the pot. And we saw that, I thought the most savage one was actually the church one, where it was somebody had been murdered and they had to write all these horrible associations of who they thought was the most bossiest or whatever. It's really to release the cat amongst the pigeons. Is that the right saying? So to really screw with people's emotions and go, hey, I can't believe you did that to me. And that really heightens the drama, and that heightens the sense of betrayal or suspicion. Why would you do that to me? I can't believe it, So phenomenal. I mean, the missions totally this year, they're not just showing up and doing a mission for the sake of doing a mission. They are there to create emotional turmoil. And I mean, it's amazing. Fabulous writing and creation for those missions in terms of making it wonderful for the viewer to make everybody more unhinged.
Well, I'm here to make this podcast very emotional turmoil, and I'm going to ask you this question, V. V, I'll start with you. If you had to stab someone in the back who's on this podcast right now,
for
some silver to stop from getting a shield, who would you stab?
Depends. Am I a traitor or a faithful?
Let's just go with all of us are faithful.
Oh, okay.
Who would you stab in the back?
It's got to be you, Mucky. We've got that history. It's got to be you.
Wow. Oh, wow. Each week I just get more and more disappointed by you. Our relationship.
Why stop now?
Well, Dylan, I'll ask you. Obviously you haven't gotten to know Fiona as well as Julia, but if you're in that barn, who would you stab?
The problem is, if you're asking me, are you dead because you've been stabbed in the back now? Because who's going to go last? They're going to get shield regardless. So I'm gonna stab you in the back because you've set up this ridiculous Machiavellian challenge.
Yeah.
Well, I would
So that's
ask Julia.
2 stabs for you, which I probably can't. I'm probably not allowed to do.
Yeah, well, I guess it's my body's now been torn in half, so I guess I get 2 different funerals now. I guess for 2 different halves. But Julia, I feel like I know what your answer's going to be. But who would you stab in the back?
I could do a Joe, and I could stab myself.
Oh, great!
Oh,
nice.
Wow. What a hero. Julia.
What a hero. Yeah,
what a hero.
Oh, poor Joe, man.
Yeah.
What twist. I feel for him, mate. And I know everybody's got different personalities, or they're going, hey, no, we're here to play or whatever. But it is hard. It was really emotionally, it was a big, being away from your families and being thrown into the game. And of course they signed up to it. But it is very hard. It's a hard game, especially the longer that you're in it.
Yeah, because I feel like, when you first hear of the Traitors, right, it's like, oh, you're in this mansion or this building and stuff, and all you got to do is just find traitors. You'll maybe get murdered or maybe you'll get voted out. But, if you reach the end, there's a huge cash prize there. How exciting is that? But I guess you never really factor in all the other elements, right? You don't get to contact family, it's a 24/7 game. And
the breakfast isn't as good as you think it's going to be.
It never is.
Yeah.
I was disappointing thing. What was the most disappointing thing on the breakfast for you, Dylan?
Well, for us, the main thing we had at breakfast, I think I'm not supposed to. I feel like we've been told we're not supposed to talk about this. Anyway, for me, the most difficult thing at breakfast, we had the main substantial thing that we each had was a little glass of yogurt with some muesli on it. And it was,
oh my god,
it was fine, but it wasn't very much. And before I went in, I'd watched the Australian season 1 Traitors, and they had piles of bacon and hash browns and eggs, and I was like, yeah, it's like a hotel breakfast every morning. I could deal with that. But that's not what it was.
Well, we're kind of done with episode 9 here, but we do see at the very end that both Cialy and Bailey do decide to seduce rather than murder. And Dylan, do you think this was the right choice for Cialy and Bailey?
It was it was a weird choice, I think. I don't know that they needed to, and I think it only made their game more complicated.
Yeah.
I guess the hope was that they would recruit someone and then push them out. It would have been interesting to see when they'd made that choice, it would have been interesting to see what had happened if Cialy had managed to recruit someone else from his group, because that would have really changed the dynamic. I can only say that I think if I were in that position, if I were one of the 2 people in that tower at that point in the game, I don't think I'd be bringing someone else into the tower.
Yeah, especially when at that point both Cialy and Bailey are playing phenomenal games at this point. No one is, well, I guess Cialy was kind of receiving some heat from Kat. Do you think it could have been a smart move to recruit Kat at that point?
There's always that idea that you recruit someone to kind of take the wind out of them. Could have worked.
Yeah. Well, how about you, Juliet? Do you reckon it was the right choice to recruit?
Well, I think they kind of did that, eh? They did. It was either Kat or Ben. Which one? They're a team. They're a duo. So which one do we do? I thought it was interesting that they brought someone in. I would have gone an overt tactic and murdered Kat. I think that's what I was thinking. If I would go, okay, and then Cialy could be like, of course they're going to say that it's me. It's not me. It's an obvious thing. or then could they go, well, that's so obvious that maybe they're trying to make it not obvious.
Yeah,
But I think you can
it
kind
starts
of
to get real
weasel your
confusing
way
when
out.
you go that way.
Yeah, it does,
Yeah.
because it's like double negative, whatever. But that, yeah, I thought it was an interesting choice. I think I would have gone for just, like you said, they're playing a phenomenal game. I mean, and I think that Ciali can probably weasel out of the situation that he's in. Just get rid of her and then go, oh my gosh, they're trying to make it look like me, just like how they did earlier in the game with Bree, or you could come up with a cover story.
Yeah, well, I mean, like as I sort of brought up earlier, like when you crunch down the numbers, you've got 7 people left, and Sally, Joe, and Jason are like a locked 3, and Bailey's sort of attached with that. It does seem like Bailey's going to be getting some heat from Jason next week, but that's still like 4 out of, well, I guess 6 if you're going to include the murder. Like, I feel like Sally does have just a direct path straight to the end.
I was feeling that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what's your thoughts on that, V? Or do you think something can happen that will, throw Sally?
Oh, well, you never know. And I love a traitor, and I'd like to see him take this all the way to the end. But I think it's an interesting strategy to, instead of murder someone, to recruit then banish. And it's a trickier strategy, but it's probably one that can cover your tracks a lot better than murder. So I'd be interested to see if this is how they continue to play for the next couple of murders. It's a roundabout murdering. And I think it done well, it could really, really work. But, it's a wild card.
They might only have one more murder at this point. I can't
they might
do the
maths.
maths,
How
but I
many
think
more have we got?
Because I think last season, it was final.
They'll have one, I guess, on night 10, and do they have one on night? Maybe they've got 2. I can't think about. Maybe they've got 2 more conclaves anyway.
Tonight they'll, the last night they'll have 1, and then maybe 1 more, maybe not.
Yeah. Well,
usually you end with 5, don't you? Final 5.
Yeah,
I think
so.
Yeah, typical.
Well, for Dylan, something that was very interesting is that when Ben was recruited, the next day they're all talking and whatnot. Ben had already been going so hard after Ciali, and you could tell he was trying to not go after him that much, but he pretty much planted his flag, with the idea with that move. Is there anything Ben could have done to really get out of this situation without drawing too much suspicion on him?
No, it's hard, isn't it? Because it's one of those things. Again, it's like shifts. People are looking for changes.
Yeah.
So if you go one way and then go, and you can get away with it if you've been a person who's ping-ponged around. Again, Joe could get away with it. Joe's ping-ponged all over the place. Ben's been more stoic in his picks, but then I don't know. Like it's hard to know. Like we have a sense of who's going for who, but also there's lots of chat. Like, you've got people going for certain people, but it's not like they're the only people they're talking about. So how confident? Like when we're hearing them speak in interviews about who they're going for, and we're seeing like a focus on who they're going for, that's good for our perspective. We know what their internal plan is, but in most cases, they're not just out there talking about just one person all the time. So from the outside, from other players' point of view, it doesn't necessarily look that someone is as singly focused as they might actually be. So maybe it's not super apparent anyway. Yeah.
Well, it was quite an interesting sort of standoff where Ben and Sally even have a chat where Ben's like, "Oh, I've kind of gone a bit too hard for you the previous day," but also Sally's thinking in his mind, well, the whole reason why we recruited you in the first place was to banish you. Do you think it was the right idea to banish Ben at that point?
I mean, you've got to banish. Like, this is one of those things. Every round table you have to banish someone, right? And you've got to be able to make an argument. There's got to be a reason to banish a person. There's got to be something going on. That's why this. Again, this is another like pet peeve I have about various plans people suggest for ways to play the traitor. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's it's better not to banish traitors, so you've got a longer time to figure out who they are, so you can get rid of them at the end.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's all well and good, but how are you as a collective group of faithful going to decide which faithful to murder or to banish, and then make that happen coherently? It's the same sort of thing in this situation. It's like, it's all well and good, recruiting someone with the plan to banish them is kind of like a little gift to the faithful, but you've got to actually then be able to execute that banishment, and you can't go too hard, and you can't like unreasonably team up, so it's I don't know. I think any plan that anyone has is only as good as their luck at getting it to happen.
Yeah. Well, Julia, once again we see another fantastic mission. I don't know who's writing the missions for the series, but whoever it is doing such a phenomenal job where half the cast is strapped to an electric chair by Paul Henry. And he even said a quote, which I love so much, which is like, don't ask me why I have electric chairs, I just do. Which, I love Paul Henry so much. But essentially half the cast is strapped to an electric chair, and the other half has to answer a bunch of questions from Paul Henry. And if they get it wrong, you get like the other people get electrocuted. But if they get it right, they win silver. Like, I loved this mission, and I think it was probably the best mission in the whole series. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, firstly, why do you think it was the best one?
I think it's the best one, quite literally, because of the shocking value to it. Like, you're actually torturing the cast and stuff like that, and also, it's really testing. Like, have you been paying attention enough in the game? Like, the stuff about like the stairs, the statues, and stuff like that, and what did you say during this other mission or at this part of the game? Like, even some of them, I like paused and I was trying to think of it myself. I don't think I got a single one right. And so that's why, for me personally, I loved it so much, because it's about your social awareness in the game, and there's also other people's lives were potentially at stake as well. So, yeah.
And also as well, could you, be undone? Maybe if you were so good at it in terms of social awareness, people would be going, they are paying attention, they are good at this game, or, we've been, you've shown your cards or something. Yeah. By the way, what is the prize pool at now? What are we at?
I think it's
two episodes away.
50,000, I think. Or
Only
somewhere
half
around
of
there.
it.
Yeah.
They often save a big challenge for the end, like a big value thing for the end, I think, on these formats. But I don't know. The thing that bugged me about this challenge was that it was just there was no mixing it up. The group were answering. One group was answering together. The other group was all being shocked together.
Yeah.
There was no swaps around, or like people taking individual. People having individual goes at being shocked or anything like that. But it was still good. Tens pads is what they were actually being shocked by. If you were curious.
Oh, okay.
They were being hit with a tens machine. I'm probably not allowed to tell people things like that, but that's what was really going on. So they were actually experiencing something.
Well, do you reckon, Dylan, it maybe could have been slightly improved if everyone was in an electric chair? So then you really could have...
if everyone was in an electric chair and they were taking turns, as teams taking turns doing answers, so they're all getting a bit of it. It's just like there's four people who are not really kind of getting much of it.
But maybe is that part of the thing? That's part of the separation of going, I've been zapped and you had an easy ride. That was really hard for me,
Yeah.
Even though,
Wasn't hard for Jason. He loved it.
Oh,
he did.
He was like, I've done this before. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah. Well, we do get set up.
You been tasered, Julia?
I haven't been tasered. No, I didn't volunteer because originally when they came out, when tasers came out, for a short period, they were like, in training when we were learning how to use them, you could volunteer to get tasered. And I was thinking, why would I volunteer for that? And the same thing with the spray at police college. People volunteered to get sprayed, and I just thought, I'm probably going to experience it on the job. I don't really want to volunteer for it. But fascinating how people respond. Some people
would have been a good story for a podcast in the future.
Yeah.
Well, after this mission B, we get the setup is it's pretty much Ben versus Ciali. It's Ben and Kat really against Ciali. Did you think that there was any hope for Ben to survive this round table, or do you reckon he was done and toasted?
Yeah, I think the plan was in place. It was in motion. He was chosen specifically for that. And, the overarching theme the last couple of episodes is, can we just let traitors be traitors for like a minute? Even just a minute. Like, there was like the very next conversation we had after Ciali revealed he was a traitor is people coming for him. And it's like, oh. And with Ben, there's straight away. No one even gets a chance to be evil anymore in this game. It's Bailey's been like having a great time, but she's the only one.
Oh, hey, do you think it was high risk with Ben saying, like only for one day? I went,
yeah, but I don't know what they could do.
It's one of those
with
borderline
that.
things, isn't it?
Yeah.
I went, I don't know if you should have said that, but it might have been to the rules a bit there. But he said it.
He said it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I feel like at that point, after he said that, I know if I was in the group of faithfuls, I'd be thinking, like, who voted for Ben then?
Yeah,
because potentially he was set up. Like, what's your thoughts on that, Dylan? Would you have a similar thought process, or
maybe? But it's also like, how much of that kind of double think can you get, right? Because who voted for Ben? Like, what, five of them? I can't even.
It was 4. Yeah, it was Ciali, Bailey, Jason, and Joe. Yeah.
So like 4 of them voted for Ben. Like it's not that helpful. If maybe one of the traitors voted for Ben, maybe they didn't, and then still you've got 4 candidates, which is basically half your number anyway. So
yeah,
it's the only thing that's tricky about it. Like, I think one sort of meta criticism I have about the format of the game is that it's a little bit too easy from within the game to keep a track of how many traitors there are, to an extent.
Okay.
Because that certain things can only happen at certain times. You've got a set of rules that get given to you. But even as a viewer, that, for example, a blackmail can only happen must happen when there's one traitor left, right? So, if you've banished a bunch of traitors, and then there's a murder, like you kind of got a sense that it's down to one, and then there's a murder, you can be like, well, I think there was probably a blackmail. Like, everyone was so confident that Mark had been blackmailed and turned it down. Other times earlier in the game, although it didn't happen in this season, but in our season there'd be a time when we'd got rid of a traitor and then there was no murder that night. And you're like, okay, well they've done a recruitment. We know that they forfeit a murder and they did a recruitment. So we went from maybe we went from 3 down to 2, and now we're back to 3. So it's like, and I get that that's kind of part of it, but then when you get to the end, it kind of makes it a little bit too mathematically easy, I think. I'd like a little bit more ambiguity around the end, so you just don't know. I'd also love if there was a way in which you could potentially get to that final 5 at the round table, and actually it turns out that for some reason there is no traitor sitting there, that you actually got the last traitor out, the night before.
Yeah, that would be wild for everyone to be turning on each other.
It wouldn't require much tweaking to the rules. I think you could just, because there's a bunch of rules about how things can happen, how many days into the game and so forth. You just bop it all back by 1. So you always have to have a traitor in the game up until the final round table, but you just make it up until the second to last round table, so that you could potentially have that scenario. Because I think it would be fantastic as a viewer.
I don't know if you guys know this, but Dylan was our guy.
Rules guy.
So when we lost Dylan, nobody understood the rules of the game anymore.
What you didn't see in our season was the number of times where I would be at the breakfast.
This morning.
Yeah, where I'd be sitting there going, for God's sake, has no one read the rules?
That was what Dylan would say on repeat every breakfast. And then we would be like, no, so Dylan, what's happening? So somebody's been blackmailed, and we'll be like, everyone would just go to Encyclopedia Dylan, who seemed to be the only person that came prepared and actually read the rules and understood them.
Well, Julia, a question for you. So at the end of your season, at the final 5, you obviously had 2 traitors. Were you aware that there was only 2 traitors?
Oh yeah. Because you could do the there had to be one. So I mean, we knew that with the way that it had played was just as Dylan had explained. So we knew that there was going to be 2. So we had to find 2, and So, but in saying that, it started differently. We didn't know that there was going to be 3 or 4 at the start. So how many do they keep in there? So there is the potential that there could be one more. And in this case, they started with 3 and then brought in a 4th, right? And then that was crazy. And then that didn't last long. And then now we're back at 2 and then 3 quite close to the end, I thought. Well, there's been sole traders, eh? Bailey was a sole trader for a while.
Yeah. Well, you can't go into a round table with just one traitor, because the chance of that traitor being eliminated is a problem. I think you could tweak the rules so that you could do, but I think the other thing is you get to the end, right, and you think you know how many traitors there are, but also there's some second guessing involved.
Always
some different series internationally have played around a little bit with how much information the traders at the very end, or the players at the very end, get about their banishments, as to whether or not people disclose their statuses that when they leave the game, just to keep a bit of vagary in there. So that's also interesting.
Yeah.
That
see
towards the end
about that, eh? Yeah, going, now they know that they've got to go again, or that definitely points to the other person.
I like.
Yeah.
I like the idea that you kind of have to be, you really just have to have a lot of faith in your own decision making at the end.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's what really undone Brooke last season, actually, was when Julie announced that she was the faithful. It was like, well, it's got to be Brooke, right? Because I feel like both Sam and Anna were pretty much like the leaders of the faithfuls, like the most faithful of the faithfuls at that point. So I kind of felt...
Sam says he was still not convinced in that last sort of moment until he saw Brooke sort of breaking down a little bit. Squirming. So, so there's, you can never be completely sure, but I still like a little bit of ambiguity in the game.
Yeah, definitely. Well, at the very end of the episode, so we have Cialy and Bailey deciding who to murder, and their 3 options is Donna, Kat, and Joe. And Donna's someone who we haven't really talked much about this season, V. I feel like Donna, everyone has always seen her as a faithful, but what has Donna been doing this season? Like, I feel like even in this roundtable, she randomly votes for Noel out of nowhere as well. Like, what's the path forward? Because
she's still convinced there was a traitor on the 3 digging their graves. She's never
She's back at that episode. Yeah, she's playing it under the radar. She's playing. It's a good strategy. The fact that we haven't heard much about her. She'd almost be a good person to recruit if we had a little bit more time. But she's another one that's been under the radar. So it'll be interesting to see if she can ride that all the way to the end. She may.
Yeah. Well, Julia, we saw for the last murder of your season, Brooke and Colin had to decide who to murder, and I think it was both you and Anna were sharing a shield, or one of you guys had a shield, and Sam was the perfect person to murder in that spot, but they chose not to murder him because his social game was great and his threat perception, no one really saw him as a huge threat at that time as well. Do you think the same case could be made for Donna?
100%, because just as V said, she's played a wonderful under the radar game where I almost feel like Donna is playing her own game. It's not like she's probably listening to other people, but she's also just playing it like, oh no, I think it's this, and then she's not maybe going away from the majority vote or the strategy. I just think she's playing with her heart on her sleeve, and I respect that. It's just, I think it's this, and I'm going to vote that way. And that's totally fine. And that's actually a strategy that we haven't even talked about, is just playing your own game. going, I think this.
Well,
and it's
we've
working
seen them.
for her. To get this far is crazy. It's so hard to stay in.
Yeah, well, Dylan, we've seen that with Joe, right? Where obviously he's part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, but Joe has been doing Joe throughout this whole season as well. He'll call people out left, right, and center, but then will completely change his thoughts about them, an hour later. He's also up on the chopping block for a potential murder. Do you reckon there's risk for Joe as well at this point?
Yeah, I mean, there's risk for everyone at this point. Like, if you're in the conclave as a traitor and you've got how many are there? 4 other people. There are 2 traitors, 4 other players, 4 faithful.
Yeah,
like you can make a good argument for any of them, depending on how you think about it. And I think, and that's the thing when you get to this end, this pointy end of the game, right? Is you've got to try and game out exactly what happens in every scenario. And the thing is, there's so many variables. Like if we murder, if we murder whomever, like what does that look like? How do people interpret that? How can we spin it? It's just, I think there's good arguments to be made for every player, and there's also downsides to everyone. And that's the same like with, the reason I think they didn't murder Sam at the end of season 1 was because they were convinced that he was in their thrall, essentially.
Yeah, they could manipulate.
He believed them.
Yeah.
But but that's not necessarily what was going on in his mind. But that's what they thought. And then had they murdered him, maybe that would have reflected on them in a certain way. In the end, what they tried to murder... Did they try to murder you, Julia, or Anna?
No, they tried to murder Anna.
And she had the shield.
And Brooke said it was because I came out smiling. But I came out smiling because I was just jazzed because that was the first time that I'd been in that damn room. And I was going, woohoo!
Yeah.
I had it. I did well. What a rush.
Yeah, ultimately, there's no way to know. I think you're rolling the dice, in that making a murder choice, you're completely rolling the dice, and so, you can make an argument for anything.
I think. Oh, sorry, go Dylan.
I was going to say all 3 of their finalist candidates for murder are, there's perfectly good arguments to make for all of them.
Yeah, fair game, eh? I reckon if it was me, I would be doing exactly what perhaps, Brooke and Colin were thinking with who they had on their side. I would be getting rid of on the face of it, the smartest, from my perception, the smartest players perhaps going, okay, we need to get rid of this person now. Who can I manipulate at the end? Who do I have the closest association with now? That would get me in.
Yeah, well, we do see, like Kat's name was brought up, and obviously Kat's been very hard on Ciali for this last few episodes. But obviously you've kind of got that, that I guess a classic switcheroo where it's so obvious for Ciali to murder Kat. So why would he do that? But then you also have the other switcheroo part, which is since it's so obvious that he wouldn't do that, he might actually do that. Do you think there's a good option B for Ciali to murder Kat?
I know, you know, that I know, that you know.
Yeah.
I know, that's the thing, it's just like, it's like Dylan said, you're rolling the dice. At this point, it's just, I don't know. I mean, Kat has to go, but it is kind of an obvious call, isn't it? Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
I'd get rid of Kat. I'd take a high risk move and do it.
Yeah. Well, I feel like it's very interesting because I feel like if Ciali wants to, steamroll his way to the end all by himself, he needs to keep Joe and Jason in the game no matter what. But I feel like if you're Bailey, she's obviously extremely intelligent. I feel like she recognizes that she's the fourth in their 3, right? So if they choose to keep playing at the final 4, she's going to be the one that gets taken out. So I feel like if you're Bailey, you'd maybe try and push Joe because then they'll free up a spot for you.
Great thinking.
The last 3.
Yeah. To keep Kat in, to keep the heat on Ciali.
Yeah, that as well. Anyways, that does sort of almost bring us to the end of the podcast. But, let's quickly name it. Who's going to win this season, B? Is it a faithful or a traitor?
Oh, my God. I'd like to see a traitor win. I'd like Ciali to win.
Yeah.
I mean, every time I think of a pick to win, I then second guess myself, which is why I'd be terrible on the show. But he's definitely who I'm going for, which means he'll probably leave next episode. So,
how about you, Julia? Who do you think's going to win the season, a faithful or a traitor?
I think Ciali's got more of a rapport. I think he's got a team backing him, so I feel potentially it's going to go Ciali's way. In saying that, I was nervous for Bailey because I've been rooting for Bailey to win this entire time. But I'm nervous for her because she hasn't had heat now at all, right?
Yeah.
And you've got to take some at some stage. I'm nervous. I think it could go Ciali's way, but I'm hoping that perhaps Bailey could pull something out of the bag.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How about you, Dylan? Faithful or traitor?
I think Mark is going to win. He's going to crawl dishevelled and muddy out of the woods and claim his rightful winnings. That's all you're going to get out of me. This is the only suggestion I'm making.
Yeah, or as Andrea says, Noel, the sole faithful winner, or even Joe. I feel like that would be pretty great winners, actually. Noel and Joe. It would be very much like how on earth would these two, the last two people?
Yeah.
Out of everyone.
Yeah. It would be a delightful twist. I think at this point, any of them could. I think you could make a happy argument for any of them to win. I don't think there's anyone at this point you're like, God, I hope that person doesn't win. So that's good.
Yeah. Well,
I'm hopeful any of them take it out. It's been a great season. Yeah. I mean, such an eclectic cast. Noel's played a great game too. You know, he's been played with such decorum.
Oh, and he's had such a hard game. He's been dealt the shit card every time. It's so
really
funny.
Has.
So
he's
sad.
just been, I know, and to stick it out too, to stay in and just have constant heat on you the whole time. It must be so exhausting. But it's a strong position to be in because traders will leave you alone, going, all right, well, he's probably going to get taken out.
I mean, we literally saw that. They brought up Noel's name. They're like, nah, we've got to keep Noel in. He's a suspicious guy.
But like, how long can you keep that going? At some point, you got to go, oh shit, he hasn't been kicked out yet. Maybe we should worry about him. So you know.
Yeah.
But maybe you have to keep him in, right? Because then you get to the end and people are like, well, we know he's sus, so let's get rid of him. So I don't know. Donna finally gets her way and finds out.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of saw that with you at the end of your season, Julia, because you voted for Anna on the King's Round Table, right? And obviously you were with Colin when Colin got banished. And so I feel like there was a wee bit of like suspicion around you. You're kind of like a loose thread in that, if that makes sense. Like, do you think something similar could happen to Noel?
Totally. We will find out. Tune in next week. 3 hours, 3 at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
From the end of season 1, after I came back into the real world after exiting the game, I bumped into my cousin, who happens to be Anna's husband, because you know this is New Zealand, and I was like, oh, is Anna back yet?
Strangers.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
19 of us. And I was like, is Anna back yet? And he's like, oh, no. And I was like, oh, interesting. She must be, she must have made it to the very end. I think I'd figured out at that point. And I was like, I think she's a traitor. And he's like, no. And I was like, I think so. Because after I got out, after I'd been thinking about it still for days, and I was like, I think it was her. I was wrong.
Yeah.
But even then.
Well, Dylan, I'm not sure if you've been watching our podcast, but one of my personal favorite segments on this podcast, which has really just been turned into, let's just shit on Mucky's idea and let's just praise Julia and V's idea or Sam's idea. That's called the smartest move of the week. And before we say our smartest move of the week, we got to make a theme song, right? Okay. And so there's 2 different things you can do here, Dylan. You can either help with the beat or you can add in your own sound.
Mike, I'm not working.
Why didn't I think of that?
Well, V, let's get started with you. Make a crazy beat. All right, Julia, play off that.
I mean, This is chaos. I'm not musical at the best of times, and we don't even have proper sync between us. This is doomed to failure.
Yeah, it always is, Dylan, always is. All right, Julian, play off it. All right, Dylan, you got to come up with the same, man.
That's it. That's the noise I'm making.
Hey, it's the smartest move of the week. Smartest move of the week. Mucky, Julia, Dylan, V. It's the smartest move of the week. Thanks again, everyone. Smartest move of the week. Great job, everyone. Great job. I'd say that's probably like the longest smartest move of the week song we've ever done. But Julia, I'll start off with you. What do you think was the smartest move of this week?
I had it, and now I'm not sure. I just still think. Oh, I mean, like this was crazy. Yes, I wondered if Joe voting for himself was going to end up being a power play long term. I wondered about that because I've never seen that done before. And I think that clearly highlights him as a faithful, right? So then there's no question about that from the end game. Does that mean if it ends up being Joe at the end and then they're trying to decide, like, you know, and then maybe he can pull that out of the bag and go, well, why would I vote for myself? You bad losers. You know, maybe, I don't know. I'm just throwing some grenades here.
Yeah, well, how about you, Dylan? In your opinion, what was the smartest move of the week?
I've got two options to give you. One is what would have been a smartest move had it happened. And the other is a smart move that doesn't have any long-term implications in the game. Which one do you want to hear?
I want to hear both.
Okay. The smartest move, had it happened, would have been Ben taking the opportunity to reveal that he had a shield and cover up the potential of there being a recruitment. For two reasons. One is, A, it gives him cover, gives him something to deflect the idea with, and B, even like it's good just for the traitors generally in that it throws suspicion upon how many there are.
Yeah.
So that would have been, had it happened, a good move. And the good move that has no long-term implications in the game was Jason rushing to lock the door.
Yes.
I did have that one in my head, actually.
That's just good safety.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people at home should learn that. If you have people in masks running at your car, especially if you live in Auckland, you gotta lock your door. Lock your door.
Strong situational awareness.
Exactly. How about you, V? In your opinion, what is the smartest move of the week?
Well, I think we've sort of talked around it, but we haven't really pinpointed how smart it was for Bailey to recruit Ciali and murder Utah. Those choices, those two people, that was an excellent choice. It was, so you can't fault her decision making.
Well, that's so far could turn out to be completely the opposite.
Ooh. True. Well, you know, probably for the first time on this podcast, I'm actually going to side with Julia on this one. She actually took mine on, which is, I feel like Joe not only like stabbing himself in the back for the silver, but also voting for himself, just clearly showed he was a faithful. Like, there's no way around it. There's no way you can look at that. Obviously, he was having a really hard day that day. There's no way you can look at him and be like, oh, he's a traitor. You get what I mean? I felt with that kind of behavior, like, he's obviously a faithful breaking down.
I disagree.
Okay.
I feel like had I been there that day, Utah having been murdered, Utah having been really close with Joe, and then watching Joe have that kind of breakdown, it might make me wonder about Joe having been behind the move.
Oh man,
A guilty
True.
conscience.
All right, so we've got
and yeah.
So we've got a bunch of options on the table, and so to officially decide the smartest move of this week, Julia, you get to cast the first vote. What do you think was the smartest move of the week out of the options?
locking the door.
Yeah.
Locking the door.
My
All right.
vote is that. I'm gonna go there.
Right.
So-
How about you, V?
I'm going to stand by Bailey. I think
Stand
she
by
was really
Bailey?
clever. Yeah.
All right. So that's one each. How about you, Dylan?
I'm going locking the door as well. It didn't pay off for him, but I think it was the smartest, quickest move.
Awesome. And you know what? I would side with V, but she's betrayed me so many times. I got to join the returning players, the players who know it best, Julia and Dylan. Locking even Andre agrees. Locking the door, smartest move of this week. Jason, he's teaching everyone health and safety. It's like that seatbelt ad that used to play in
make
the
it click, man.
right? Yeah, make it click, make the lock click. Yeah, make the lock click. Right. Unfortunately, that does bring us to the end of our podcast. Dylan, where can people find you? Have you got anything exciting coming up that you'd like to share?
Okay, let's go. I'm Dylan Reeve on most social media platforms. And tell you what, I helped create a television show called My Family Mystery, which is on TV1. You can watch on Sunday nights. Very unlike the Traitors, nothing at all similar. Just a fun and lovely show that I really enjoyed working on. So yeah, watch that, and especially if you have a people meter, definitely watch it.
Yeah, and how about you, Julia? Anything exciting you've got coming up that you'd like to share?
Gosh, just business as usual, man. I'm just trying to get ahead in life.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Just trying to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And how about you, V? Anything exciting?
Oh, if you've heard the screams coming across on my microphone, it's just trying to keep my 5-year-old sane and the rest of the family sane. So that takes all my time.
Yeah. Because the school holidays still going on?
No, school's gone back, so I don't know which is worse.
Oh.
Probably school holidays. But obviously something displeased him, and so he had to. And now the dog's coming in the dog door, so I can't get a moment's peace in this house. Perfect place for a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've got something very exciting to share. I've been teasing it for the last couple of weeks now. But this Saturday, in just a few days' time, 3 days' time, I will be meeting Shin Baddie at long last. My Star Wars crush, my celebrity crush. It's happening this Saturday. I'm so excited. I feel like after this, I'm done with life. Like I've achieved everything that I've wanted to achieve. And is there really anything else to accomplish at this point? Probably not. But do you know what you can accomplish? Subscribing to the channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. If you enjoy Traitors New Zealand content, let us know down in the comments and tell us who you think is going to win. A faithful or a traitor? Can the faithfuls do it 2 for 2? Or is the traitor going to sneak their way all the way to the end? But until then, ka kite anō everyone, and I'll catch you all next week.